There we go. Time is 3:01, so we're going to go ahead and convene this meeting. And this is the regular board meeting for the CAC. And I need to have, I think we'll go ahead and go around and introduce ourselves and also our audience. So we'll go ahead and we'll start over here with John.
John DeVoe, Woodland Park.
And Edge, Green Mountain Falls.
Or Untitled Citizen at large.
Bill Bowles,
City of
Park County. Oops,
Stammer.
I'm Tamara.
Bill Bowles, Park County.
Ellen Hasse, Teller County.
Jim Moore, still at large.
Kim Mutchler at large.
Hal Moffett, El Paso County.
Tim O'Donnell, Kono.
Courtney Stone, citizen at large.
Sharon Brown, City of Fountain.
Jessica McMullen with Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. And in the audience?
Yes.
Jenny Bishop, Colorado Springs Utilities.
Okay.
John Hall, CDOT.
Kathy Winter with PPP.
Okay, very good. And we're passing around the sign-in sheet, so that will take care of that. Okay, with the consent agenda, I'd like to have approval of the consent agenda with the change that we're going to add 4B. So with that, I would like to have a motion to accept the consent agenda with adding 4B.
I have a correction.
Yes, sir.
On the membership sheet, I should have an asterisk by my name, showing this is my second term.
Okay.
I'm not eligible for a third.
Yeah. What is it?
I'm sure.
Okay.
Anyway, with that correction, I need approval of the consent agenda.
Okay, we need a second.
I will second that. Courtney Stone.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We have that. Okay, public comments. And we have wastewater recycling in that. Okay, could you introduce yourself again, please? Thank you.
My name is Jenny Bishop. I am from Colorado Springs Utilities, and I am here to present today on the ways that Colorado Springs Utilities reuses water, as well as give you guys an overview of the Northern Monument Creek Interceptor project. So I've been told to keep this to 20 minutes, but if you guys have questions, I'm willing to stay as long as you need me.
Thank you.
All right, so to understand Colorado Springs, the way that Colorado Springs Utilities reuses water, it's important that we first go over where our water is collected from, so our water system. And this map illustrates exactly how vast our system is. We actually collect water from 3 different basins: the Colorado River Basin, the Upper South Platte Basin, and the Arkansas Basin. We actually have 4 major delivery mechanisms to bring water here. Over half of our water actually comes from across the Continental Divide. Some of our water comes from as far away as 100 miles away to Colorado Springs. We have 27 raw water reservoirs that we use to store our water in. We have 6 water treatment plants. We have over 2,100 miles of distribution lines to be able to serve all of our customers. And we serve a population of about 460,000 people. The reason that this is important is because Colorado water law defines the way that water can be used and reused. And so all of that Trans Mountain water, remember I spoke about half of our water comes from across the Continental Divide. If you go through the trouble of bringing water into the water basin that you are using it in, but that water does not originate there, you have the ability to reuse that water. So if you go through all that trouble for that water, the state really wants you to use that water efficiently and to the maximum extent possible. If you bring in water that has traditionally been used for agriculture, there's a certain amount of water that that went to the growth and development of plants. That water that is no longer going to the growth and development of plants can also be reused to extinction. And then water that you bring up from groundwater that is in no way connected to surface water, that's another source that can be used to extinction as well. But water that naturally occurs within a basin, so think about snowpack on Pikes Peak or water that you see naturally occurring in monuments or fountain creeks, that water can actually only be used once, meaning that we could treat it, we could use it in our system, clean it up in our wastewater treatment facilities, and then turn it back in to Fountain Creek to be used further downstream. And the reason for that is because other people have come to rely on the way that water has traditionally been used within that basin. I see a lot of head nods, so thank you for following along so far. So Colorado Springs reuses its water in several different ways. So we use reclaimed water for non-potable uses. So reclaimed water is a fancy way of saying we treated it in our wastewater treatment facilities, which are now called water reclamation facilities.
Okay.
Right. We also do reuse by exchange, which I will go into further, which functions more like a bank transaction. And then we also do augmentation of outer priority depletions. That's a way of saying that we are pulling water from a stream in one area that we don't necessarily, the timing isn't appropriate, but we go ahead and replace that in another area to make the stream whole. By reusing our water supplies for our non-potable water uses, so the non-drinking water uses, we can get about 1.2 times water use of our water. If we're using our water for potable uses, we can actually use it 2 times. And the Southern Delivery System, and this is important, the Southern Delivery System actually is another way for us to reuse our water supplies. So what exchanges do is it takes that water higher up in our system, and then the Southern Delivery System is able to pipe that back into our town when we need it. So I prefer visuals as opposed to speaking, so I think this will help illustrate what I'm talking about. So what happens is we collect water up high in our system in those 27 reservoirs, and it can either go down the Arkansas River Basin or we will pump it over using transmission pipelines like the Homestake system or the Blue River system. It comes to local terminal storage. Terminal storage is a way of saying that it's closer to town. We treat it, we send it out to all of our customers, then we collect that water. That water can either, it goes to our wastewater treatment plant to be treated, which would then be sent back into our streams, or it can be sent back into our system as non-potable water, so non-drinking water. Non-potable water is usually used for things like golf courses or Colorado College has a large non-potable system, or our Drake plant uses that non-potable water for cooling tower water. That red line shows that exchange. What an exchange does is it will retain water up higher in our system and then replace that water lower down in the system. So there's a reach of stream where water will not be occurring, but that water is replaced before someone downstream needs to use it. So that is a way that we are able to reuse a lot of our water supplies. So this is another way of kind of talking about or illustrating what I've been talking about. So our local supplies, so things that occur naturally, we can either use that for drinking water supplies, or we can actually go ahead and apply that to non-potable supplies. So there are instances where maybe you just divert some stream water to irrigate a golf course. So that would be an example of a non-potable local supply of water that has not been treated. Our reusable supplies then can also be used for potable water and then augmentation of non-potable water. And then what happens to that water after it's been used once depends on the characterization of that water to begin with. So Colorado Springs actually has one of the oldest and largest non-potable water systems actually in the entire western United States. So we've actually been reusing and reclaiming our water since the 1960s. In 1996, we increased our use of non-potable water by using it at Drake for the cooling tower. So those clouds that are formed over downtown, that's non-potable water that forms those clouds. And all reuse is governed by the Colorado Reclaimed Water Control Regulations. So it's not something you can just do on your own. Our total non-potable water use is about 10,000 acre-feet per year. The reclaimed water, so that's that water that has been used, treated at our wastewater treatment facilities, and then is reused, is about 4,000 acre-feet per year. And as you can see, far and away, the vast majority of our water actually gets reused through exchange. So we do that kind of banking of water where we put it up high so that we can bring it back over to Colorado Springs to be used. Yes?
Question, is the reclaimed water of 4,000 acre-feet, is that included in that 10,000 acre-feet?
No, it's separate. So there are some additional ways that we could reuse water in the future, and that includes direct and indirect potable reuse. So direct potable reuse would be treating that wastewater treatment facility water to a higher standard and then directly using it again. Indirect is that there would be some intervening use, or else it would go into the stream for a little bit and we would collect it again to be used in our system. There's also on-site customer reuse. So this would be like if you're washing dishes, you keep it in a dish pan, and you go ahead and put it on your flowers. That's kind of what an on-site customer reuse would be on a really small scale. Gray water reuse is where you have these larger systems but function rather similarly. You might collect your shower water and use that to flush toilets. That actually comes with additional regulations and additional complications on the state scale. So we haven't really embarked on that too much thus far. Some other opportunities, though, is Colorado Springs Utilities is looking at how we can potentially do water and wastewater service for the region, which may allow some additional reuse for non-Colorado Springs Utilities current customers. And then in order to maximize our water efficiency, we're continuing to look at our non-potable water use, and we're doing a resource plan update right now. So I mentioned the regional water and wastewater potential. And this is the Northern Monument Creek Interceptor project is an example of the potential for expanding those services. So the Northern Monument Creek Interceptor project is being brought forward right now because you've all heard about the City of Champions Air Force Academy Visitor Center complex. When they were looking at developing this complex, it was determined that while they could be served by a force main and lift station, so basically pumping their wastewater uphill, it's always preferable for wastewater to go downhill on its own. And so this concept of a Northern Monument Creek Interceptor project was born. And so the reason that this project, the City for Champions Visitor Center Complex, is kind of spurring this on is because that got the Air Force Academy interested in talking with Colorado Springs Utilities in order to get those easements that we need to actually do a gravity interceptor across the Air Force Academy property. We've actually wanted to do a gravity interceptor for a long time, but the federal government is not always real anxious to work with local governments unless there's some really good reasons to do that. So between the visitor center complex and the fact that they could actually eliminate their own wastewater treatment facility with this gravity interceptor, they're a little more anxious to talk to us about a potential gravity easement through their property. North Monument Creek Interceptor project would also allow Colorado Springs Utilities to eliminate 3 lift stations, which would be fantastic. It eliminates that O&M, it eliminates some extra operation time, and we all like things to flow downhill, naturally. Keep that in mind. So this Northern Monument Creek Interceptor project would also allow us to take wastewater from 6 districts, 6 sanitation districts that are located north of Colorado Springs as well. We have a capacity within our J.D. Phillips Water Resource Reclamation Facility to be able to handle these additional loads. I want to give you a little background on to why that is, that we have additional capacity after I answer your question.
The 6 districts that you mentioned, what do they do with wastewater right now? Do they have their own treatment?
They do. So there are 2 different wastewater treatment facilities that are regional wastewater facilities that those 6 districts use right now. Woodmore, Monument Sanitation, and Palmer Lake Sanitation, those 3 use the Tri-Lakes wastewater treatment facility. Then Denala, Tri-View, and Forest Lakes Metropolitan District utilize the Upper Monument Creek Regional Wastewater Treatment Facility. Yes. So the reason J.D. Phillips has some additional capacity to be able to treat more wastewater is not because it was inappropriately sized at the time. When J.D. Phillips was permitted and sized, users within Colorado Springs Utilities boundaries were using about 200 gallons per person per day. We have since reduced that to less than half of that. Our typical usage now is 96 gallons per capita per day. The other thing is that treatment facility was designed using loading that was down at our Las Vegas wastewater treatment facility. Las Vegas serves an older part of town, and so they were seeing more infiltration into these old pipes, and so they was accounting for bigger loading factors at Las Vegas that we just don't see up at J.D. Phillips because it's in a newer part of town. So we have this capacity at J.D. Phillips that while it was appropriately sized at the time, our usage has changed over time, and that gives us that ability to be able to take additional wastewater flows. So this is one of those win-win-win-win-win projects that you hear about, but you don't think actually exists. And there's potential here. I'm not saying it's a slam dunk right now because it's not done yet, but there's some really big benefits to this. In addition to Colorado Springs receiving that corridor for utilities, we would, as I mentioned, remove those lift stations, be able to remove at least 3 lift stations, if not more. We get to better utilize capacity at our J.D. Phillips plant. It helps to increase the wastewater revenue, which so it spreads the cost of future infrastructure improvements over a larger customer base. For the visitor center complex, it allows them to have that gravity main rather than doing a lift station and force main, and it's actually a more cost-effective mechanism for that entire complex. The Air Force Academy would get to stop operating their wastewater treatment plant. The Air Force Academy is much more in the business of educating and defense, less about treating wastewater. So if we can take that away from them, they'd be pretty happy about that. And then those 6 potential participants up north, they would avoid having to spend a lot of money on meeting future regulatory compliance. What happens with regulatory compliance is it ends up being a large capital expenditure. And it's one of those where you see a vast economy of scale the more wastewater that you treat. So these facilities may have to put in, let's say, $12 million of upgrades, but they're only spreading those costs out amongst 5,000 customers. We may have to do those same $12 million of upgrades, something along those lines, but we're spreading that out over 500,000 customers. So that's a lot more palatable. It also reduces the number of points where there are wastewater flows, treated effluent, coming into Monument Creek. Instead of 3 different points, there will only be 1 point of reintroduction into the streams. This project would allow those other districts to be able to decommission their wastewater treatment facilities if they choose, which would cut down on their O&M as well. So our work to date, the Utilities Board is fully on board with this project, and they approved us to keep going forward with this at their October 30th, 2018 meeting. We've had conversations with the potential participants, and they are all very excited of the potential of this going forward. We have completed a routing study, which really points out those big red flags that say this is a go or no go, and the routing study looks great. And then we're proceeding right now with the 30% design. So this is where we get more information about the depth of the pipeline, how big that pipeline needs to be, where these interconnects will happen, and all of that information will be gathered during the 30% design phase. Once we have our 30% design, we will have another meeting with utilities, people, and with our northern participants to make sure that everything still looks like it's a go for going forward and that we haven't hit any more red flags that tell us this is no longer a good idea. Yes.
I assume the red line is the route?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Could you back up? I don't know if it's possible.
Yes. So, and that's about as much detail as I'd like to give you right now because we are still in the very early phases. And so I'm sure some of you know this and you're looking at that and saying, oh, no, there's a great big gully where that thing is, and you're going to want to avoid that. So those are the things we're looking at now. So there are some additional considerations. One of the return flows, as we have talked about earlier in this presentation, are a really important part of water rights portfolios. So one of the things that we're investigating now then is how do we make sure that these participants are able to access their reusable return flows that have been treated. These return flows will now be coming into Monument Creek further south than they were before. So this is one of those considerations that we are working on right now. What are the physical and legal mechanisms available to make sure that these northern participants remain whole with their own water rights? And I don't have answers for you right now. But the benefit of being able to reuse those return flows is it actually allows them to see the benefits of being able to utilize that water. It may allow them to cut back on some of their Denver Basin groundwater pumping. It extends the life of those wells, and it gives them more breathing room for having to acquire additional supplies for their growing populations. Yes?
Jay, does that mean that you would pump water, reclaimed water, for instance, back uphill so they could use it for potable, for landscaping, non-potable landscaping, things of that nature? Is that currently a part of the project, that there would be a supply pipeline as well as a interceptor pipeline?
Right, that's a great question. So there are several different ways that you could actually get return flows back up to those districts. Whether that is a non-potable pipeline going back up north, back uphill, that's one option. Another option is that you actually develop storage south of Colorado Springs where there's a reservoir there, and then there's a raw water pipeline coming up and going north. That's another option. Another option is some sort of intra-system exchange where they would pay a little more for additional treatment, but we would actually deliver potable water supplies to them in exchange for their non-potable supplies coming out of the wastewater treatment facilities. So this is where the infrastructure and legal pieces come together that we have to evaluate further in order to come up with our solutions going forward for this aspect of it.
And there's some costs, but the benefits would appear to outweigh the costs.
There are definitely costs, yes. But as you know, not having water is awfully expensive as well. And so so being able to weigh out what the costs are of getting those return flows back and the various mechanisms that we have for that, that all goes into this period of time where we are studying how we make this work.
Is there a timeline as to when this could possibly be functional?
Well, so the developers of the Visitor Center complex would really like that to be them to begin receiving service in October of 2020.
Wow, that's pretty soon.
Yeah, that's incredibly aggressive. And I'm not sure that appropriately accounts for the NEPA studies and permitting that needs to be done. I see anyone who's worked with the federal government kind of snickering at this idea that we could have this functioning by October of 2020. We're pushing for that. Colorado Springs Utilities will do our best to facilitate that, but we can't make DC go any faster than anyone else. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay.
Yes.
Main advantage for this, for the city of Colorado Springs is more water? Is that the idea behind it?
Colorado Springs Utilities would actually not get any water out of this deal.
Outside of being a good Samaritan, why do they want to do it?
What's that?
I said, why do you want to do it?
Oh, we would want to do it because it does generate revenue. So these districts would be paying for the cost of treating wastewater. Because we already have fixed costs in operating our wastewater treatment facilities, and because they operate better with additional flow, this allows us to maximize the efficiency of our wastewater treatment facilities and recover some of the O&M for those facilities from an additional user base.
Okay.
Is the cost of main pipeline and all that, is that infrastructure, is that going to be dispersed, or is CSU taking on all that cost?
So our initial proposal for distributing the cost of that pipeline, Colorado Springs Utilities would bear the lion's share of that cost up to the visitor center complex. Those northern districts would pay for the upsizing that would be necessary in order to take their wastewater flows for that portion of the pipeline, and then those northern districts would pay for the pipeline from the visitor center north to their connection points.
Okay, and so with the cost analysis, CSU still thinks they'll come out ahead, taking on a lot of the infrastructure costs up to the Air Force Academy Visitor Center. That's how I'm understanding it, right?
So
That's the assumption?
yes, the assumption is that between the regional participants participating in the capital infrastructure costs, so the putting that pipeline in the ground, so their participation in that, and then their ongoing treatment costs, that Colorado Springs Utilities would not lose money on this deal, that we would be able to pay for even that section of pipeline that we are putting in largely ourselves.
John.
What happens when one of those outlying districts reaches their 90% level and they have to change their sewage requirements for the state? Because it's mandated you have to do that. Who pays for that?
You're asking what happens if those northern districts reach their capacity levels?
Sure.
So the northern districts are supplying their build-out flow numbers for us.
Okay.
So they are responsible for that. If they exceed those numbers, there may be some opportunities for them to buy out capacity from another district. There will also be some safety factors included in that, the sizing of the Interceptor. So those are all things that we're still negotiating, but because they are rather geographically limited as to how much those districts can expand, we're trying to take that into account in the initial sizing.
We just had to spend $10 million in Woodland Park to increase ours because it was at the 90% level, and it should take us through build-up.
Yes.
This is kind of an ignorant question, but is this just El Paso County?
Yes.
That's your service area?
Yes. So there's several reasons for staying in El Paso County. One is a very natural boundary to stay in the same county. Anytime you go over county boundaries, it gets a little more
Difficult.
more difficult. You add more cogs in that. The other reason is because Colorado Springs Utilities has signed on to Arkansas Basin Preservation Principles, which largely means that we have committed to keeping water in the Arkansas Basin. If you go north of El Paso County, and even parts of El Paso County actually drain into the South Platte Basin. And so we are trying to avoid that muddying of waters.
So to speak. Yeah, so to speak.
I was going to just make another remark. I represent Green Mountain Falls, and we're in El Paso County. Part of it's in Teller, believe it or not, just a little bit of it. But I know there's a big I'm so old. I remember when the pipeline was built, to serve the Air Force Academy from the reservoirs up, above us. And it's so complicated, and I just wonder if you've got any more sensible ideas about the mountain area. I mean, it's kind of complex up there, as you know.
Yes.
And we've got cesspools. Those are all looming for, you've got a wastewater plant, we don't. And we pump water up, I guess. We pay our utility bills to Colorado
Right,
Springs
so Green
Utility.
Mountain Falls is actually served by our Ute water treatment facility. So it actually goes right by Green Mountain Falls. So the
Okay.
water isn't going uphill, it's actually gravity-fed downhill.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, why would you? I mean, it's complicated, as you've said. As for wastewater service up into the Woodland Park, Green Mountain Falls, Cascade areas, that's not something that we are looking at doing at this time. So we're not necessarily looking to go out and do wastewater projects. What we are open to, though, are these opportunities where we can partner with existing districts to put money in the ground once and serve a whole lot of purposes for that. That's not to say that something wouldn't happen in the future, but that's certainly, we're not looking for more work to do. But if there are opportunities, that's something that utilities is open to.
Do you find that the federal government might get involved with the problems in the mountains with stuff coming down and all? Do you anticipate?
I think it's probably more of a state
could be doing that.
Right. CDPHE and some others, they're certainly looking at those opportunities for cleaning up and dealing with wastewater situations. So I think that's probably more where you're going to see the pressure from. But I honestly don't know a whole lot about that.
And one more final question. This is also can we look at all the stuff again on a website that you might have, the maps that you were showing? I couldn't see them very well.
So we don't have a website up and running. I would be happy to send over, I have a one-page front and back fact sheet about this that includes the map on the back side. So I will go ahead and send that PDF over to Jessica, and she can make it available to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
This is Hal Moffett. First of all, Jenny, I'd like to say thank you very much for coming in and talking about this. It is complicated. She went through it pretty quick. But I think that there's a couple of takeaways here. First of all, we live in Colorado, and we're very fortunate that we have historical access to supplies of drinking water. And there's this big complex system to collect that and bring it over. We also live in an area that is going to be very prone to drought, whether you believe in climate change or not. Periodically, we have 5-year, 10-year droughts in this area. So any system that moves water for reuse, for reclaim, for recycle, personally, I think that is the direction that pretty much all communities in the West need to go. Colorado Springs has been a leader in that. I mean, phenomenal. This is a really advanced recycle, reuse system. And this would just go further towards that. So I think it's great that projects like this are being considered, as you said, and I thought it was a great line. It's a win-win-win. So thank you. Thank you for coming and doing this.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Okay, are there further questions? I have always been amazed at Colorado Springs' collection of just drinking water. 11 counties, if I remember right, because I took the tour. Oh, my gosh. That's incredible, because we don't have a major river. Monument Creek, Fountain Creek do not cut it. And, I mean, it's amazing, the collection of water and the pipes and the reservoirs. It's just, to me, it was just amazing. And 11 counties, getting water from 11 counties. Wow. That's incredible. Okay, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Excellent presentation. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Jenny. Okay, we're ready to move on to 4A. And do we have someone doing that presentation? There she is. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. Catherine Wenger, Transportation Planner. We have three requests for amendments to our 2019 through 2022 Transportation Improvement Program, or our TIP, Short Range Transportation Program. Two of them are from CDOT and partially from Copper Ridge Metro District as well. The first two you see on your table are to add funds to the I-25 Powers Extension Corridor project, and CDOT will be funding with state money the I-25 and Powers Freeway Stormwater Basin portion, and then CDOT will be overseeing the Powers Extension Corridor and I-25 and interchange that is being paid for with private funds from Copper Beach Metro District. And these are updated costs based on new designs, I believe. I have a CDOT representative here. And so those are the amounts there. And then the final project that's being requested to being adjusted in our TIP is to add a project that you actually saw a couple of months ago that we removed based on ineligibility, but it was ineligible for faster funds. And since they already awarded that project, they felt that they needed to, still find money for them for that project. And so they found some SB 228 state funds to actually fund that project. So they're requesting that go back on our TIP document. And that is for the Community Service and Supports an ADA van, and that's $50,000 of state money. And I'm happy to take any questions, and we have CDOT here as well, so they can help me out with them.
Hal.
Yeah, I had seen information that indicated that the North Powers extension was finally going to be revived again, but I just saw that like 10 days ago. I've been out of town a lot, but I'm very impressed that we've got $52 million of private funds. That will be used for the extension as well as the interchange. Is that correct?
So what you see there is for the project, that's funding for the project that does the interchange at I-25 and connects to Voyager Parkway. So it is only that segment. Will not be able to pay for the amount. There'll need to be additional funds with the Metro District continuing to get revenue to connect from Voyager to 83 and Interquest. But certainly this is the first step, to getting this project. So what those funds are is they're bonded funds that the Metro District is going to do. City of Colorado Springs recently passed some measures in there that help them with revenue, or I shouldn't brief for Colorado Springs, of course, but has some additional. But that portion, that funding right there is what the Metro District has on their estimate for just the portion to Voyager. And between there and I-25.
So Voyager goes and dead ends at Northgate Boulevard.
That's correct.
Is that correct? So where is this
well,
project?
I think there's a road that goes north, but
yeah, but it jogs right there.
so as your diagram.
Do you have this available?
Let's go over that.
I think that might have one.
Because this is the portion that, forgive me, I'm asking rather than stating. The portion in the middle, that is the portion that has already been graded through.
Yeah. So this is Northgate.
Right.
This is Voyager. This is the portion that's been graded to the south of
through the golf course area.
Well, that's way down there. This is the Bass Pro Shop. Again, this is Voyager, and this is the portion south of the Bass Pro Shop. The developer recently built Spectrum Loop Bridge right there, connecting the site through there. So further down, which is southeast, north is to the right on this screen, is your golf course and all that, where future powers would connect all the way to State Highway 83, Interquest Powers Boulevard.
So this is Voyager at the bottom, not Powers.
No.
Down at the bottom there, right
This,
there.
this is Voyager. North is this way, over here north.
Yep.
This is Voyager, this is Northgate. This is the interchange complex, and this current project will connect it to, just get that portion to Voyager. So, I mean, the immediate utility of this is a quicker connection with all the congestion potential, with the visitor center and all this. This just gives people a lot more commuting options to get over to Voyager without plugging up Northgate, for example. A lot more interchange infrastructure there to do that. Regrettably, it won't give you the route all the way connecting into the heart of Powers Boulevard and all, but you can only fund one piece at a time.
Then forgive me, why is the word Powers involved in this?
Well, it's State Highway 21. I mean, this will connect, and will connect to State Highway 21, Powers Boulevard.
Eventually.
That's the, yes. Yes.
An approximate cost estimate for what would be left to do, just to give an idea of how long that might take to pull those funds together? Just a ballpark?
It's basically about somewhere in the ballpark of $40 million. Depending on, I think that estimate is generally with just 2 lanes, which is what probably gets built here right now, not the full build-out of 6 lanes and stuff, but, yeah.
There'd be another $40 million to get it to actually go to Powers.
Yeah.
Probably.
Jump change.
Right.
Hal mentioned, and I recall the same thing, Jim Moore. Has there been a recent announcement about the Voyager to 83 tie-in?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion. Mostly the developer has gone to city council to get their revenue all set for this. I think there's been some miscommunication or maybe some misunderstanding for people that this current, certainly the long-term plan, I mean, this is all configured correctly. You can see how these will become the ramps.
Yep.
When, so the main line will come, cross over, Voyager here with a bridge structure. So the long-term plan is certainly that, but none of this current funding. What the Metro District has been working on is getting enough revenue to ensure that they can bond this. That's what's really in the near term here and can get constructed here in the tip cycle, if you will. After that, I think all of us, CDOT, everybody, we'd love to see this connection. We think it's an important, connection. It was part of the environmental assessment when we took over Powers Boulevard, so we really support it and would love to see it. We certainly don't have revenue on our side. Even with the ballot projects, this was not going to be a top project. Powers Research, 24, we had numerous other priorities. So the Metro District is the one that really has to advance this.
Private money from that development out there by Bass Pro?
Listen, I don't want to, I don't know what when we say private, this is a Copper Ridge Metro District that has a taxing revenue source. So you tell me whether that's private or not. I don't.
When that whole
and the city approved some more tax. So
when that whole area was planned, I remember reading in the paper, there was a TIF program out there that was going to generate income to help pay for the connection over to Powers.
So that's the Copper Ridge, and I believe they have a 1% sales tax.
Right, and that's going to, again, build up as the area grows to assist that, I'm assuming.
Yeah, well, look, again, I'm not an accountant, but, I mean, my understanding is the revenue for the next 20 years or whatever from that is slotted to pay the bonding for this $52 million.
Just want to make sure I'm reading the map correctly. Yeah. Off to the left, or off to the right, which is north, is the current Northgate exit, right?
Exactly. It's hard to see, but there's a roundabout there. There's a roundabout there.
Yeah.
The new Starbucks.
then there's going to be a
Oh, I'm
whole
sorry.
new,
Is there?
a whole new interchange?
Yes, it's going to be a braided interchange network here, so you still have off-ramp here, an additional off-ramp here, coming up.
I'm
to
just thinking of
Powers,
the
yes.
confusion factor of people coming in, trying to get off at Cimarron. I lived here since '87, and I still miss that exit going off at Cimarron because it's not signed correctly. At least I can't understand it. But I'm just wondering, if this is going to be a huge confusion factor, having the old North Gate there and then this other huge interchange, braided or straight-laced or what?
Well, look, we can sit here and point to the possible confusion points. If you really wanted to get to Northgate and you got off here and instead you ended up, going to Voyager. But then again, I'm not sure, unless you were headed to Struthers in particular, and you wouldn't be that far off. But certainly we need to make sure to sign it well here to make sure they understand this is the exit to State Highway 21, to Voyager. This is the exit right here still that will take you to North Gate in particular, or the Air Force Academy Visitor Center. So I think, you've got total agreement from us that we need to make sure that it's signed effectively and stuff. And I know our traffic engineer is very heavily involved in this and the entire, Visitor Center development proposal stuff and the traffic related to that. So there's we're well aware that perfection is going to be hard to achieve here, and we're trying to put as much effort as we can in working with the developer, the Metro District, and the Academy and everybody to get this right, the city.
Okay. Do we have any further questions? Go ahead.
I just
yeah.
have, I guess, one or two questions. The top item on your sheet is to state funding of $6.25 million for the required storm drains, et cetera.
Yeah.
That's your ad funds for the top item.
What it is so the water quality for all of this area qualifies for, if we put a pond here and here, which is near that Monument Branch, right, qualifies for regional water quality funding that CDOT has pools for. This is really just, what we consider a very good candidate where a project, so we as CDOT, we don't have a lot of funding we can put into the roadway aspects, right? We were talking 109, 110 failed.
Right.
But what we do have is this, and these are important regional water quality facilities, and so my project manager, Andy Steckline, applied for funding and was able to get funding for that, and that's CDOT's participation in the project, is being able to utilize those statewide resources, here for our community.
Is there any match or any additional obligation for either El Paso or Colorado Springs on that aspect? Okay.
No. That's a comprehensive funding source.
Now, and then my second question would be, how does this connector interplay with the final version or the current version of the Powers extension? Is there another interchange that would then be?
So the Powers extension would just, what would connect this is, this would continue a bridge over Voyager.
Yep.
It would progress then through the golf course area down to basically connect in with, right there at 83 Interquest Powers Boulevard, where you'd have an interchange as well. If you notice driving northbound on Powers, right, you see that it fans out, same thing. It was built where those would eventually become the ramps. And then what you'll have is the eventual freeway connection. So it'll be Powers will be a freeway. State Highway 21 will be a freeway from Woodman all the way up to here. In particular, there is in our environmental assessment and interchange also planned at, I think it's Flying Horse Drive or whatever. It looks like the development in there has probably made that an unlikely actual outcome, that there'll be an interchange within there. I think your final there'll be a bridge, but it looks like it's doubtful that there's room left with the development. There'll be an actual interchange, so those people will still have to access through Voyager, but You'll have the highway interchange, you'll have a Voyager interchange, and an interchange at 83 Interquest is the most likely outcome.
Okay, and then I guess my final question would be, from your opinion, i.e. CDOT as well as PPACG Transportation, is this the correct first step for getting a Powers extension? And I say that because somebody's paying for this, quote, paying for it, but it also kind of puts it puts constraints on the rest of the project, because you're going to connect with this somehow.
Yeah, well, look, this has been on a approved environmental, assessment and FONSI and all that, for a decade or more. So this is long established.
But
There's really not an option on where else to put Powers other than to wipe out massive amounts of homes and flying orders. The route is well established. It's been on all sorts of planning documents. This, yes, this makes definite sense to us. I'm certainly not here to do anything but support this project and say this is a good step to get it rolling.
As I say, I was confused because what I read, I misunderstood what was being funded.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, there's definitely some more optimistic looks in certain, I think, news stories or whatever about exactly how much is getting funded on this current project.
I thank you for handling our question.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
John, just to kind of recap, so it sounds like a PL was done, so this is a whole master planning was already done, environmental assessment.
Yeah.
So the little mice and everything, so there's no red flags or anything that can stall the project. All that's been addressed, right?
Yeah, well, we're working through some very significant issues with the Air Force Academy, with the easement that I-25 is on and stuff like that. I mean, we're not advertising tomorrow for this. I mean, there's still a lot of work that the Metro District and my staff is doing to the reevaluation of the environmental assessment. Rob Fry and his team are working on that, our environmental manager. So, I mean, we're not 1 week from advertising it, but we are, I think an educated, guess or assumption on schedule from all of us is that it is certainly plausible that this could be advertised and contracted in June. That's a feasible outcome.
Okay, so
Maybe a little optimistic, but feasible.
Okay, that was going to be my last follow-up question is, where are we on the design stage? So you're like...
Yeah, they're post-FOR.
Okay.
Yeah, they've had their FOR. They're reviewing final design. We at CDOT just held a FIR, FOR combined for the pond project yesterday.
Okay. So you're saying you could go to add in June?
That's certainly what the Metro District would like to see, and we certainly would like to see it too. But there's definitely some still. It's the biggest thing is the easement with the Air Force Academy. There's long-term easement issues. But to address your first kind of comment too, so I mean, is a full-fledged environmental assessment done for Powers Boulevard? Really, that was part of when the swap happened, where the state took over State Highway 21, Powers Boulevard, and for Academy, and then numerous other roads, and were part of that, right?
Okay. I'm sorry.
No, I'm
Jim.
ready. If you're ready for a motion, I'm ready to make a motion.
I'm ready for a motion. We're ready for a motion.
I'll move that we recommend approval by the board of TIP Amendment 8.
I second. You go, Ellen.
Okay, we had 2 seconds. We're good. Okay. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Okay, thank you. So passed unanimously.
By the way,
Okay.
this looks a lot like the Interquest exchange. Or interchange, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or the XQuest exchange, the Interquest, whatever.
Okay, I think we're ready to go on to 4B, and we did meet yesterday. Courtney is the chair for NEPCO, and so I'm going to let her go ahead, and I'd like to thank all the people who were there yesterday. Okay.
So to give a little bit of context, the subcommittee meeting that we had yesterday initiated with a membership request from NEPCO, which we recommended approval to the board last month. So the the intent of this committee meeting was to say that we've recommended approval for this particular organization, but moving forward, what does the process look like for community-based organizations to have representation on the CAC? I will say that our recommendations are on the table in front of you in this beautiful format, and as formal as they look, they're very much in draft form, and we are very much open to input and suggestions from the entire committee about how to make sure that we are being as even-handed and inclusive as possible with how we make sure that representation on the CAC is coming back to our roles as diverse and broad-based as possible, that the people that represent community needs in this group should include as many people as possible. So the committee met with a few intentions in mind to identify a process moving forward, but to also make sure that we had a discussion about potential unmet needs or unserved communities that could use or benefit from representation on the CAC. So we have this, we have sort of a brief for you, and some of the discussion from yesterday really focused on what our current process looks like. And in short, there's not a really great current process as far as what it would look like for a community-based organization to get membership on the CAC. We sort of started our conversation with a few prompting questions. One of which was, what currently sort of unites membership on the CAC and that representation? So what do our groups currently have in common? How do we make sure that we're addressing unmet needs? And how do we include organizational representation in a way that doesn't create a totally different and sort of bureaucratic process for people to work through? So how do we make sure we're being inclusive as efficiently as possible? So you have our recommendation, our initial recommendation in front of you, and I have to say that I am so incredibly thankful for the group of people that were involved in this decision-making process, because I think it brings to mind the things that I really appreciate about the CAC is that we do have a very diverse and broad base of perspectives and needs. And I think as much as possible, we were trying to be sensitive to maintaining that in the future. So a couple of things to kind of give some context for. We sort of identified that there's 3 different categories of membership within the CAC. We have members who specifically represent a geographic area. We have our 6 individual at-large members, and we currently have 3 community-based organizations that we love and have done an incredible job of representing the needs of that organization. That said, that latter group, the community-based organizations, those that have membership on the CAC currently, they have that membership based on a process at the PPACG board level that does not currently exist any longer. So in the past, there was the option for community-based organizations to have an associate membership within PPACG. They paid for that membership, and as part of that process, they were able to appoint someone on the CAC to represent their organization. The PPACG board updated their bylaws in 2017 at some point, and they removed the option for that associate membership. So it is no longer a possibility for organizations to have that associate membership and to appoint someone to the CAC. Our current bylaws reflect that old process, that community-based organizations would go to the PPACG board for appointment and approval without necessarily having to come to the CAC, because they were being appointed based on a membership that we have no interaction with. So our bylaws aren't necessarily reflective of what the current process at the PPACG board level looks like. That said, we recognize that those organizations have brought incredible value as far as being able to provide a broad base of input, and that we wanted to both include those organizations and make sure that that option for representation is available for other organizations moving forward. So this is sort of where we came to our recommendation, which was that as that third category of community-based organizations, that we create 5 seats on the CAC total for organizations that represent a broad base of needs in the community, and that process for application to be a community-based organization would directly mirror our process for individual at-large memberships, so that we're not creating a new discussion, new approval process, new committee, but that application into the CAC for that representation would just sort of fall in line with our October. We initiate a membership appointment committee, they review applications, and are collectively able to recommend back to the CAC who we should then recommend approval for to the PPACG board. So I think and I see your hand, Oren. So we have some potential sort of processes or what's the word? Not but things that we want to make sure that community-based organizations are maintaining, that they demonstrate that they are representing maybe an unmet need, or and that they align with the general goals of the CAC. So what that looks like as far as term limits and current organizational representation is really open to this group. We have some thoughts, but we really don't necessarily want to. I was so thankful, honestly, that we have people on the membership committee that are more kind than I am, because there was a lot more sensitivity to making sure that everybody is well represented and feelings are addressed in this process. So we're not trying to sort of enforce this recommendation, but we do want to open up the question of what does it look like to have organizations that represent across the board and are doing the work of the CAC at a community level.
Okay. Could you give a written description of the recommendations that you were just describing orally? I don't find any that didn't correspond with.
So in the later part of that, where it says, where should process work? How should the process work?
So we would have about midway down the page.
This is the sheet you need to look at. It says, how should the process work? And that's same as.
And it was different from what you were saying, and that's just simply I'm reporting. I'm confused because this isn't what I heard you describing just now.
Okay.
I'm hoping before I vote on something, this possibly this important, that I could see something in writing rather than trying to figure out the 10 minutes of information that you just shared. I didn't catch enough of that to do an intelligent vote. So if we could get something in writing.
I
Because
think
you said things differently than what's on this piece of paper, and that's not a complaint or a criticism.
No.
That's can we get more information, and in written form would be real helpful.
I think Courtney was just kind of doing a high-level summary of what's on this sheet. And so what Courtney expressed is really just a summary of, and right here, the steps 1, 2, 3 are our initial recommendation more in detail. For example, when Courtney spoke of a community-based organization wanting to have a seat at the CAC, one of the 5 seats that we're recommending, they would all go through a membership proposal process, an application to the CAC, and some of the items that would be required in that application would be demonstrating to the CAC that they are an underrepresented, they're a community organization that is underrepresented, and so that would then 1, demonstrate the CAC's number 1, underrepresentation of community, 2, it's additive to the CAC, and show us how you are adding value to our CAC organization. 3, the third criteria that we mentioned is diversity. Is your organization diverse geographically, type of community, gender, race, what have you? So those would be the 3 key demonstrating to CAC, hey, this is why we need to have a seat at the CAC, because our organization represents a community that's not being represented anywhere else or is underrepresented. So that's kind of the summary that Courtney was trying to give, and without reading every one of these bullets to us, for us. Does that clarify a little bit?
Well, I still heard her discussing one thing, and there's something else written on this, and I'm hoping that I can have something written from what you were saying, not just this form. That's all I'm requesting. I do understand she was highlighting some of this, but there was much more information verbally
right.
from her that when I vote, I would like to have all that in writing in front of me so that I have a better understanding of what I'm voting for.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, because Courtney summarized what's on the board's bylaws, our bylaws, so she was giving a little bit of history in the background. So I think hopefully we're going to open this to conversation, and we want everyone's feedback, concerns, thoughts, recommendations. So we're not, this document you have here, we're hoping that we're all going to redline it and edit it, and then we can go to the next step. So you're not necessarily voting on this as is, but rather, hey, we have this, let's fix it the way we want to as an organization, and then we can talk about, how we want to proceed.
Can I make a suggestion that rather than have a summary of what Courtney said, let's have it transcribed, if we could?
Sure.
Because I do think that will at least allow an understanding of the background. One of the things that and I was on this membership committee. One of the key things that we wanted to do was to have a process, and the process would flow through our normal membership standing committee. So that's number one. We're not creating anything new as far as process. But the key thing that after a really good discussion, and there was quite a bit of disagreement initially, and that was great because it brought up kind of key points. One of the key points is we would like to ask any organization that wants to become a member of the CAC, why should you be a member of the CAC? Is there a group of people or a group of communities that are not currently being represented or feel they're not being represented? And those may be two different things. Is there some piece of our current community that is not being represented effectively? Whether you're, interior city core, those, that community probably is more interested in, non-motorized transportation, et cetera, et cetera. So we're asking that anybody or any organization that wants to be a member answer that key question. Why should you be a member of the CAC? And that's where this little list of 1, 2, 3, explain to us why you think you're underrepresented. Tell us that you're additive to CAC, you're not a duplication, and are you diverse? NAPCO, I'm going to use them as a specific example. From what we heard, memory only, they're an association of HOAs. HOAs tend to be either townhomes or individual single family. That's a pretty homogeneous group of people, group of interest, group of needs, as opposed to apartment people, renters, people closer to town. So we just want to be sure that we're not getting any organization that is too uniform, and they've got a very specific set of needs that they're interested in and not anything else. So that was not a concern, but that came out as a question in our discussion. Have we gone through that process? We're trying to bring that question into this. The only other thing that I thought would be important to add is that item 2 down here at the bottom, applications start with the membership committee. The CAC reviews the application. We do it at a meeting level and first at the subcommittee level. Is that correct? Then we come and we hold a discussion, not a decision, with the CAC. Then there is some level of informal, I use the word informal, conversation with the PPACG board to be sure that we're not going to vote on something and they say, what are you talking about? And then if everything looks like it aligns, we come back and we would make a decision. We're also recommending for the purposes of a harmonious CAC that is aligned on where we're trying to go, that it be unanimous. If someone feels strongly enough that they don't think an organization should be part of the CAC, that's a pretty big deal. Now, obviously, they should be open to listening and maybe change their mind. And finally, that if, in fact, we go through that process and we go through it properly and openly and transparently, that whatever decision we do make at the CAC should be final. That someone can't go to the PPACG board, for example, and I use that as an example, and get put on the CAC. That'd be our wish. We're going to try and get that.
It's up to them, but
Yes, sir.
we know what we want.
So that, I'm not trying to redo what was said, but, to get more specific, A1, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are kind of the key issues that we felt needed to be answered, and then I think our process is very straightforward. I don't know if that helped. I don't know if it hurt, but trying to...
I want to pop in for just a second. Our committee members, who we were very proud to have participate, Courtney chaired it, Sharon participated, Hal participated, Ellen participated, and Tamara participated. Just so you guys know who was there in the discussion. I said Hal. I'm good. He can hit me. He's close enough. And the one other thing that I wanted to just make sure that everybody had heard in this discussion, while we were discussing this, there were several things that came up. How do we make sure that the opportunity for membership is fair, so that community organizations all have a voice if they need one, that we don't end up overrepresented? One of the discussions came up, in 10 years, if NEPCO has continued to grow, but what if Northgate develops their own CONO and they ask to join? Then we're going to have NEPCO and CONO and Northgate and Colorado Springs and El Paso County. We're going to have this position where the reasons we allowed NEPCO would make sense to allow this additional organization, but it unbalances the CAC's wider perspective. And so part of what this was is, instead of giving NEPCO a permanent NEPCO seat, make a community-based organization seat that NEPCO has applied to be on, so NEPCO would be the community organization that got to assign a seat, because they've applied and gone through this process. So I think that's what Courtney was trying to explain. Were there any things that specifically came up where there was a question where this sounds different than what I'm reading?
Okay, Jim.
A couple of thoughts. First of all, I've already apologized personally to Courtney. I had intended to be there yesterday, but at 10 o'clock this morning I remembered the meeting. So
We had adjourned.
I apologize. A couple of thoughts. First of all, I understand that what you've developed is a process. I think we need to distinguish between what we do with the process and what we do with the bylaws. And based upon my experience, my recommendation would be that we revisit the bylaws and remove any designations. I think we already did something geographically in the last revision, and I think we can do the same thing. This would allow for us to have a process that is then flexible enough to go forward. The second thing is I would recommend that we make the terms identical. You're introducing the possibility of an administrative nightmare of trying to figure out who's in for 2 terms or 2 terms of 2 years and who's in for 2 terms of 3 years, and just make it standard at 3, and that's it. I do want to say that I think you have done some remarkable work here with a sensitivity to emerging needs in the community, and I applaud the time and the contribution and what is laid out here. I think we can address the bylaws separately, and in the process, my experience has always been when you start talking about policies or processes, they are the most flexible portion of your governance. And I would press on with that in mind that, we live with this for a year, If it didn't work out quite that way, or for a couple of years, and it didn't work out that way, we can amend it, and we don't have to amend the bylaws again.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, go ahead. John.
I try to relate this to, I'm on a planning commission back in Little Park.
Right.
We got 9 members. If we had to use a unanimous vote to put onto the council, we'd pass nothing. Nothing. We got one person who votes no every time. Term's not up yet. But anyway, what I'm saying is, first of all, in your bylaws, and I don't know this, do they have to take your recommendation? Or can they do it anyway?
You mean the board?
The board.
The board. You're
To the
saying
current
the
board-
CAC would review and recommend to. Does PPACG board have to take it?
No.
Okay, so they can just say the hell with it if they want to.
Yes.
Okay, because it must be unanimous vote. That can really cause a problem if you have one person that just always does that. I mean, ours are majority, and most of the time, if it's a strong majority, it'll go through. It'll go through council as well. But there's some pitfalls, I think, in that.
In unanimous.
And unanimous to do that, because all it takes is one person to
We
really create a
wavered
mess
back
with
and
that.
forth on that, unanimous,
Oh,
versus.
sure.
Yeah, and we still felt that unanimous would work out better. I definitely understand what you're saying, because I know I wasn't on the planning commission, I was on the main council for Fountain, and we were, for the most part, I think our planning commission worked a little bit better than what yours does, because they usually they were usually unanimous. If there wasn't there, then they would write out a dissenting, why they did not vote.
It's just like a big city, you got a lot of good people and a few stinkers.
Yes, you do.
Sometimes the committee's the same way.
Right, definitely so, definitely so. Okay, Ellen.
In working yesterday at the subcommittee level, one of the concepts that was shared that garnered a lot of appreciation and support was that because we're talking about, in this particular conversation, adding a fellow member at the CAC level to converse, discourse, share, review, discern, and make recommendations together, it was a good idea to start off by all agreeing that we thought the new entity, whatever it would be with each year's application, to come in would be agreed upon as a good partner to come to the table to begin that conversation in the next year as a new member. And I think we were thinking in terms of maintaining a cohesive, informed working group. This group has worked so well together. All the diverse points of view, all the diverse members, each bringing their strengths, their backgrounds, their concerns, and information together to help the group go forward. We certainly work together now very differently at the level of information than we did even 5 years ago. I would venture to say that based on my experience and my memories and my notes, for certain my notes. So the point is, I think that's where we were coming from when we said, let's ask to have a consensus that is unanimous about inviting any new entity to come into the group. Thank you. Oh, Ellen Hasse Teller, thank you.
I'm going to chime in that we just got, have you guys talked about supermajority instead of unanimous or?
Supermajority?
2/3.
You could set it at 60%, you could set it at 75%.
At any percent you
But
want.
then you avoid the issue of having a sore thumb in the group that can never say yes.
I do want to mention, I think, Jessica, you said at the board level, anything that was legislative action, the board themselves require unanimous, because what they want to promote on the board is collaboration, cooperation, and one team mentality. I really thought that was a great idea, great thought, and I think as a PPACG CAC recommending to the board, I thought it would be great if we reflected some of the same process or values. I do understand, John, I've been in meetings and committees with someone that votes negative on everything, but I would like to say that as a group that I have been on this CAC for 1,000 years now, and a lot of times it's unanimous.
It
and
is,
certainly
yeah.
on when we are voting in a citizen at large. And I think this process is going to be exactly the same as when we vote in a citizen at large. It just be an organization. And I would like to think, John, if I'm saying no, I don't want NEPCO, and you feel very passionate about it, you'd help me to understand, hey, Tamara, this is what's important. And I certainly would hope that I would be open-minded enough to say, you know what, I respect John, he has good thoughts, and maybe I'm missing something. I will think about it, and, you know, unless I have some reason that I'm so passionately in disagreement with, I would hope that I would, in the mentality of teamwork and collaboration, I would vote unanimously with the rest.
From that process and your opinion of that, I'm not for it.
I will be there.
Yeah, I'm not, you know, I'm not going to add anything more because I think Ellen and, you know, Tamara hit exactly what our discussion was yesterday and exactly the balance we're trying to get and the reasons for potentially recommending. I think that'd be a good thing for us to think about, and then when it comes time to put the details down, we can get a feel for whether or not how we want to do. One of the things that I do want to make certain, and this will help me too, just to be certain that I got this, we're proposing that the community organizations that be added are brought in for a 3-year for a 2-year term or a 3-year term, and I think going back to being consistent is a great idea. But that at the end of their term limit, there may be opportunity for some other organization to come in, and if we're full, and we've got 5, you know, community-based organizations, then we do an assessment, and part of the assessment is, do all of the current 5 stay? Does one of them go away and another one be replaced? In other words, there is opportunity for some changes in that. And it isn't real clear the way that it's written. That was our thought, that we have 5 seats, and the 5 seats may change over time. We actually have a situation right now for the 3 community-based organizations that are currently in CAC. One of them is asked to kind of be suspended, so they're not going to give us a representative, et cetera. They've just got other things going on. So we have 2 of our 3 currently named organizations. We also have vacancies from certain of our cities, towns. I don't think we're going to get into a situation where we've got 15 people knocking on the door, but we do want to be aware of that it may change over time as to what that mix is. And I don't think we captured that very well in this. And I guess I'm asking, is that what our thinking was? And maybe we ought to change the language, or am I wrong?
I think you're correct.
Yeah, I think
you're correct.
And another piece I'll just add in really quickly. One of the suggestions we have as a subcommittee is that our current community-based organizations are grandfathered in.
Right.
It was a thought that they are immediately assumed to have at least 1 term, 2 I don't know, honestly, or in perpetuity, but that our current community-based organizations are included with this group of 5, especially within a transition into a new format of representation.
These organizations are very good. I mean, they're here all the time. So go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I think it has to be at least a 3-year term, so I agree with both those. There's a learning curve for terminology and everything else.
Yes, there is.
The other thing I'd like to see addressed in here somewhere is conflict of interest. We want to kind of guard against developers showing up, being appointed by their neighborhood organization and coming in. So there's got to be some kind of a guard against a conflict of interest.
We actually discussed that, and maybe are all community-based organizations, or the ones that we think, and again, think about it, are they all a nonprofit of some kind registered with the state of Colorado? You all.
Ours is a nonprofit, but, we define our own rules for membership.
Okay. Okay, what about the league?
Okay.
League of Women Voters is both a C3, locally we're C3 and a C4 because we
Okay.
advocate on issues, but the trend is actually going toward just making it straight up C3.
C3,
Okay, okay.
And can I just make sure to add to that both for Tim and Julie, you have a really important voice in this process. And so if I can ask specifically for your thoughts or concerns, this was a hard conversation to have because we absolutely want you here. That said, we also feel like there is space for other people to have that same level with enough filtering to make sure that it's the voices that we need to hear and that don't have that conflict.
Yeah,
of
and
line.
our board meets at 5 on the other side of town.
I'm
Well,
on
and
my
in
way
fact,
to figure that out.
Again, just to, one of the ideas, and it came from me, was to state or to make one of the requirements that anyone who applies is a registered nonprofit with the state of Colorado. Not with the federal government, they're not a 501 or whatever the designation would be, but just about every nonprofit in Colorado has to be registered with the state. Whether you're federal, separate issue. Is that generally correct? Is that one way of minimizing no special interest, conflict of interest? Because that was
qualification
for
yeah.
a qualification for.
That's correct.
Right.
The problem is you're setting a rule or guideline for the organization, but within that organization, they define membership. So they could send
Correct.
somebody
Correct.
who was, they could, if we got
Anybody can.
Chris from Norwood,
Well, realize that in the past, we had Scott. Is that his name? Scott, he's the banker down in, or the real
Turner.
estate.
Scott.
Turner, Scott Turner? Or
Yeah.
he's a friend, but I can't
Yeah.
remember his name. So,
Turner.
and there were several times where he recused himself.
Mhm.
So, yes, but we also want to not have a realtor business alliance as a community
Right.
organization.
Yes.
Jessica, one of
John.
the things you brought up earlier, NEPCO is one thing, but if it adds and adds and adds, okay. Let's say that trend starts and you want to turn somebody down. Who's the legal counsel that we have here that's going to review this? Because you're going to end up with a lawsuit if you don't, if it's not worded properly. That's not necessarily for this board to do, but that's from somebody with some legal background to make sure that's worded properly to protect the group.
So right now, because we don't have a historical document showing how our 3 current community-based organizations were added into the CAC, we don't have anything that tells us for sure how they got there. So we have to make our assumptions based on previous bylaws.
That is true. I made all of those assumptions.
I made them with my guidance. We'll be honest here. But it means that right now, anybody who wants a seat on the CAC could immediately go straight to the law. Our bylaws and our current information says that anybody who wants to could sue PPACG to have a seat on the CAC. So I don't see that. It's not an issue now. I don't think it's one we're going to have later. And what this does is it enables us to review those applications. Here's what you're being reviewed by. You get the feedback on this. Hey, we appreciate your application, but you did not prove that you relate to PPACG's roles that we put on the back of our roster every time. This is what the PPACG CAC does. You can't prove to us that you do it. We
Kind of plowing it
shall
around,
decline.
it's a good time to sit back for a little bit and make sure you got the i's dotted and the t's crossed before you go on.
Could I say something?
Sure. Go ahead.
I was just wondering, the man who came from NEPCO to talk, I would also say anybody can always come and ask to make a presentation to the whole group.
Right.
And we should take that seriously.
Definitely.
And they could make a proposal about what we might want to recommend to our board. Don't we have that power also? So, I don't know, I was just thinking, you don't always have to be a member to come and be heard. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the discussions we had at our meeting was, and let's get specific, as we can, and let's use NOPCO as an example. And right or wrong, but let's use them.
Sure.
They are a large group of mostly homeowner associations covering northeast El Paso County. One of the questions that was kind of unanswered because we didn't think about it is, have they talked with any of the representatives for El Paso County on this CAC right now? Do they feel represented? Do they contact and work with Monument? Okay? I mean, things like that. Those are kind of good questions to understand, because if in fact they haven't, then maybe they should. And if they have and they still feel they're underrepresented, then tell us that and make your case. So I just use that as an example of kind of where we were thinking. Why we think we need this process is to ask a few more structured questions of anyone who wants to join the CAC, because we welcome that. One of my points yesterday was the CAC was put together 40 years ago, and it hasn't really expanded. Think about it.
40 or 50.
We have, the towns and the cities and the county and the community-based organizations. And in the meantime, we went from 100,000 people to 750,000. We can stand to expand our representation, but how and what is of interest is the question.
And I think with the 5 total seats for organizations beyond the cities and towns and counties, is that we wanted to try and balance a good, diverse group of people and also reflecting the increase in population. However, when a group gets so big, it is hard to get consensus. It is hard to have enough time to have good dialogue. And so that's why we thought, adding, we have the RBA, Kona, and League of Women Voters is currently our 3 organization-based seats, and then adding 2 more to have a total of 5 would be a good kind of a starting point. But I think, like you said, Jim, if we realize 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we have 20 organizations wanting to come on board, and every time we're reviewing the applications and we're struggling, and there's 7 really good organizations, then maybe we open it up to 7. But that's something we can all play by ear. Nothing we're speaking of right now is right. Nothing is set in concrete, right? But keep in mind, the reason we said 5 chairs, 5 seats, is to keep a good balance, a good number here.
Well, I think if I could just add a couple of thoughts. Number one, process, again, is the most flexible. And I would be, we could do 7, we could do 10. I have some concerns at 2 levels. Number one is making the CAC too large so that the interactions don't take place as effectively as they do now. Number 2, and I appreciate the concern about conflict of interest, but once we assign a membership to an organization, the organization is the one that brings forward the representative.
Right.
And I think we need to be very careful, to John's point about legal implications. If we try to control who is going to be the representative from organization X or Y, I think we could get ourselves into a real problem.
Trouble. Yeah, I do too.
One thing I would mention too, just in my case, from Green Mountain Falls, I'm on the PPRTA, which is just El Paso County, and then this one. But Rep. Williams, who is very active in the PPRTA, also represents Green Mountain Falls. So anybody could go to Rama. They don't have to live there, at least at PPRTA they don't. If their government said, yeah, we'd like for you to attend those meetings and let us know what happens. I don't know if people know that, but you would know. And that's just another idea, because we do have people that I'm sure they're affected, and maybe we could push that too.
Could I offer a suggestion?
Jessica, go ahead.
I'm just going to chime in real quick. So there are 3 reasons why this was brought to the CAC overall. 1, do you like the idea of this process? Do you like the idea of us switching it from 3 specifically called-out organizations to 5 seats that can be flexed and added. Number 2, if you like that idea, we have to make a bylaws shift. The bylaws specifically call out those 3 organizations, and we would need to change them so that instead of saying we grant positions to the following 3 organizations, up to 5 community-based, that light change that's in the language I sent you. And then the third question, that is also why you need to see this today, is if this is the case, you want to do this, you like this bylaw change, do you want to make NIPCO one of these 5 community-based organizations, or put them in a different category? So those are kind of the 3 things I need from my CAC today.
I'd love to hear from you, Tim and Julie, on your
Yes.
thoughts, because what we're recommending is that now Kono and the women voters are going to be, I'm going to say the word competing for a chair in a total 5 chairs. And you're, and now it's, you're going to be applying every 3 years, let's say, to get, or 6 years, sorry, to get a seat here. And so that was one of the things that we want to make sure, because you all have a seat, and I think you need to speak up on how you feel about that, and give us your thoughts.
Or you can be grandfathered. I mean, as
Well, yeah,
Maureen said.
we would be grandfathered in, in the process of this first time. Okay, I'll probably say something that's heresy in Kono, but
We won't
my own
stop.
personal, yeah, so turn off the tape. My own personal view on that is if you can't justify your existence as an organization, then you shouldn't be here in the first place. However, saying that, you shouldn't be pushed out, without some kind of a pretty good reason to be pushed out. So all I'm saying is that, yes, I understand there would be a fixed 5 number here, but if we can't come and justify why we should be here, then we shouldn't be here. My 2 cents worth. I want to make one other comment about the conflict of interest. Been on a couple of different boards where they do that right up front as part of the agenda every time. So maybe that's how we address it, because right now we never talk about conflict of interest, and this group is probably wide open for conflict of interest if anybody was. So I'm just saying, if we do this, and you have no control over who comes from the city or the community group, then we generically have to address the conflict of interest issue. I would say on a meeting-by-meeting basis, it needs to be a standard part of the agenda, that you have to declare it. And if you don't, then,
We had a member 2 years ago, who recused himself from discussion and voting on issues that did involve, he was representing, I think he was working with one of the water districts, the emerging one up in the south side of Black Forest.
Yeah, Kevin Walker.
Yep. Pardon?
No, that was Scott Turner.
Yeah.
And he doesn't live there. Yeah. Yeah, Scott did.
Kevin
But
Walker.
so did
But
Kevin.
He was
So did Kevin.
very clear about that. As soon
Yeah.
as subject was coming up, he'd excuse
Right.
himself from the room and wouldn't even be part of the discussion.
Right,
right.
yes. Ellen?
Two brief points, I hope. First, the concept of having any one of the community organizations going forward do what the Business Alliance has done, the Chamber has done rather, which is to say, gee, we're focused on other things right now. We'd like to suspend our activity here for a period of time, and we'll be back in touch when we're ready to re-enter the group. That's very respectful, and that allows us to manage multiple applicants as they could come up in the future, and still balance with our desire, a very strong desire the subcommittee had, to make sure we are grandfathering and keeping the host that we have now of community organizations that are helping us get as far as we have. It's hard for me personally to envision how we would have gotten this far, and I don't want to go forward without them. So please know it's very inclusive discussion we're trying to have here. And number two, if I can remember number two now. Number two was, well, I'll just say no because I can't remember. Thank you.
Okay, Julie, we would like to have your thoughts.
Well, as an organization representative, of course, I'm pretty selfish about self-protection and
Definitely.
don't want to be written out of that. But to Tim's
Definitely.
point, yes, we should be able to justify why we're here. And I think I would be curious to go back to the original documentation on why we are represented, and I think it had to do with the founding. And we have some significant records, but I'd have to know where to look, because I really don't want to look back in the last 80 years of our newsletters and records. So, on the personal heretical side, it's like, yeah, that does make some sense. I would prefer we had this as a non-action today instead of a review and recommend as action, because I think that, until Hal explained, what it was the elephant in the room. Like, what about us? What was the plan for the organizations? And the bylaws are, it's like, well, wait, are we voting on that too? So just seeing that and how so just fleshing it out, I think, in here would be helpful.
And there is no reason why we need to push to a vote today. But part of it is, and part of the reason why I did put this as an action item, is so that if the CAC wanted to give additional comments or guidance to the NEPCO membership request that they had placed onto the board agenda for the next meeting, that had been on our last meeting, but was moved due to the snowstorm. I wanted to give the CAC members an opportunity to say that they would keep going ahead, NEPCO deserves its own seat, its own voice, its own good, or, hey, let's hold back, we think they may make more sense in one of these community-based seats, or
Good questions.
I think what we discussed is that NEPCO would be one of the 5 seats if they meet the criteria that we are specifying community-based organizations must meet to get a seat. That's kind of going back on our word because we voted last month.
I know.
That we recommended them to the board. So this is a situation that we do need to tread carefully, but I think we have an opportunity to ask the board of directors to hold off in approving NEPCO at this time and request that direct NEPCO to go through the CAC's process in earning a seat on the CAC. I think at that time, maybe then, Hal had a good point. We never asked them. Have they reached out to El Paso County, to Woodmore, to Cedar Colorado Springs, and to get themselves heard within the community and access that they have before coming directly to the PPACG and trying to make any changes. So I think that's what Jessica is trying to give us an opportunity to just take a slight step back. I frankly felt rushed last month, and that is the reason I didn't vote, because I couldn't, in good conscience, make commit a vote when I didn't feel like I had enough information, and when especially we didn't have a process in place.
Okay, go with Ellen and then go with Jim.
Just briefly, first, thank you, Tamara. Awesome. I really appreciate that. And I'm the person who made the original motion last month, and we effectively got the process in trying to figure out how to do it. Step 2 came as step 1, and I own that, and I thank everyone for their tolerance as we work through that now. But my greatest appreciation to everyone, including you, Tamara, for your graciousness about this. Thank you.
Okay.
Question for Jessica. Has the board already approved this?
The board has not. This was originally on the March 10th board agenda. Due to the blizzard, the March 10th board meeting was rescheduled to March 20th.
Oh.
And any items that we felt could be pushed off were pushed off to the April agenda. So the NEPCO meeting item was pushed off from March to April.
Okay, we have a small dilemma then, I think. You basically had a unanimous vote last month. I was absent, so I can comment on your approach. But what was important to me in the process with NEPCO was that Terry Hayes did speak in support of it and seconded the motion, but she had spoken the week before, the month before, in support of NEPCO. So the issue of has monument been in play is moot. She supported it, and I think there's a reason to proceed. My concern is that we set a permanent seat, and with what we're talking about now, we may want to recommend that this particular paragraph of the minutes last time be withdrawn from what is presented to the board formally for discussion next month.
Okay. Madam Chair, if I could just follow up real quick. Andy Gunning. So we did have the workshop last month, this month, I guess, for our regular board meeting before it got snowed out. And we talked about this because this was one of the action items. And this wasn't formal direction, but had a discussion with Chair Steen that this was coming forward and that the CAC is still working on the overall guidance. And his direction to me was that I think the board is going to say, wait till this is all fully cooked and ready to come forward before they take action on the NEPCO request. So for what that's worth, that wasn't formal action, but that came from the chair.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Could I say one more thing as the oldest person here? I remember when Regional Council of Governments were formed, and there's a law that it has to be inclusive, is for this purpose, is to hear from the regional people. It's not an official town or anything like that, but it handles grants, but it also talks about regional concerns. And in a lot of ways, it's gotten bogged down. The dream, I think, was to have a lot of people come, just like you're standing up there. And, we can represent a group, but and we were talking about this earlier, it's really hard for people think it's a great idea and they don't want to do anything. But I was just going to say, you don't want to get too bound down with more rules when you want to be open. And maybe you don't have to call them NEPCO. Just say, please send somebody and always tell us your concerns. That's just another thing I'm thinking about. Because if you get, like John said or someone said, you might get sued. Why risk that? If it was originally founded, and the founding documents might be nice to know, why were you all included? It felt like the right thing to do, but it's grown. So
okay, we have John and then Hal.
I think the support, your subgroup's done a good job, and you need to keep doing it. I think we take this information we've got today, we come back in 30 days at our next meeting, we talk about it further, and we ask the board to put this off. It's probably going to be a May or June decision, and by then we get it as cooked out correctly. And I think we just need some time.
I think that ought to be a motion.
Okay, would you?
That's a motion.
Okay, do we have a second?
I second that, Alma.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, does everybody understand what it is? If you do, then we're just going to go ahead and vote. Okay, that we are putting it off, and we're going to tell the board that.
So motion on the table, as I'm understanding it, John, is that we recommend that the board table the vote on NEPCO membership until the membership subcommittee has finalized the membership process.
And that's based on their recommendations from what Andy just said was their workshop
their
discussion.
Not only the membership subcommittee,
we're just trying to
help this whole board.
Align.
Good point.
Please include in our discussion the proposed revised bylaws.
Yes.
Okay.
And should we include in this motion, or at least have an understanding, we want to go back to NOPCO and explain to them what the process is, and ask them, I would propose the 3 or 4 or 5 key questions that we've put in this document, maybe clean them up and formalize them a little bit.
I think we wait to have them, after we've formalized this, then say October 1st of every year is when we're taking in applications for new community-based organizations. At that time, please apply for a chair, and we'll get the paperwork to you. But we are asking you to be involved in the process and the procedure of earning a chair. And we can, I think that's what we need to do. We just need to tell them, guys, we're going to have to go through this process. Like we're grandfathering in Kono and Eagle Women voters for the next 6 years, right? And then after that, you guys are all going to go after this process. Am I understanding that correctly?
I'm not.
Am
I think we're.
understanding it, Julie?
Yeah. My only question would be, and if I was NOPCO, I'd say, I'm more than happy to give you any information and answers that you need now. And I know there's a process, and it may take a little while, but to say October is going to be, that's going to be a
This is discussion for your subcommittee.
Right. Yes, it is.
That's going to be a
Okay, we already have a motion and a second.
So thank you all of you.
So we need to, go ahead.
So
Oh,
we
Tim.
have a motion on the table.
We have a motion and a second on the table, so we need to go ahead and vote. Okay.
You had, before this last passed, you had asked Julie and Tim what they think of that, and I thought you might want to go back to them and hear that before we move forward with the motion.
Well,
No,
I
we-
thought they had pretty much
we chimed
said. Yeah, they've already, yeah.
Yeah, the tape was off when I talked, though.
So we had a motion and we had discussion, are we, and a second.
Yeah.
And discussion, what, was that all the discussion?
I think that's, yeah, I think we need to go ahead. Okay, so I'm going to call for a vote, and does everybody understand what we're voting on? I think we do. I think we do. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Carries. Okay.
So you're going to call another meeting, Courtney?
Good
Ideally
question.
before the next board meeting.
Yes. Good questions, though, people. Thank you. Okay, we need to go ahead with the legislative update. Right.
This is what the board approved at our last meeting. They approved moving Senate Bill 19029, the income tax residency presumption, from monitor to support. House Bill 1095, which is a physician's assistant supervision and liability, was suggested support. And we opposed House Bill 19199, the Colorado Clean Pass Act, and 19188, the Family Medical Leave Insurance Program Bill. Those were the four new things that were updated to the board members at their meeting on March 20th. Following the March 20th meeting, they have met, and there are a few additional bills that they will be discussing. The Legislative Committee is suggesting that the board support House Bill 19-1228, which increases tax credit allocation for affordable housing. They are suggesting we oppose House Bill 19-1261, which is a climate change plan to reduce pollution, and Senate Bill 19-196, which is a Colorado Quality Apprenticeship Training Act, and monitor House Bills 19-1257 and House Bill 19-1258, which are both TABOR-related bills relating to funding for education and transportation. And we reviewed, but are suggesting no position on House Bill 19-1245.
Okay.
Is it possible to give a brief summary of 19-1261 Climate Action Plan, or not?
Brief. Look at that.
Hold on. It'll take a second for it to pull up. So it's concerning the reduction of greenhouse gas pollution and establishing statewide greenhouse gas pollution goals. So the major bill states that Colorado shall have statewide goals to reduce 2025 greenhouse gas emissions by at least 26%, 2030 greenhouse gas emissions by 50%, and 2050 greenhouse gas emissions by at least 90% of the levels of greenhouse gas emissions that existed in 2005. It specifies that the Air Quality Control Commission is to take into account implementing policies and making rules to reduce greenhouse gas pollution, including the benefits of compliance and equitable distribution, and the costs of compliance. So that's what that bill was, and the dominant discussion about it and why it was being recommended for opposition is that the costs to local utilities providers especially in the rural areas and the urban areas, may face a great deal more cost than makes this realistic, which would not only make them expend the costs of attempting to maintain it, but the additional costs of failure to meet.
It's too aggressive.
It's incredibly aggressive.
And we love the ideas, air pollution bad, but
Yeah, it's too aggressive.
so that was where that committee was coming to us from.
Okay, thank you.
Any
Did
other
they have
ones?
any
Other questions?
thoughts, did they have any thoughts on how we could get California and Utah and Nevada to cooperate in not sending us any of their greenhouse gases?
Any forest fires?
And as a neat note, on March 15th, the income tax residency presumption for military, which we were in support of, passed and was signed by the governor.
Oh, great, thank you.
So,
Okay.
any
Thank you,
questions on
Jessica.
anything else legislatively?
Okay, Executive Director.
Okay, thank you. And I'll be brief. I think this is the first time we're doing a check-in on the status of the strategic plan. What we're going to aim to do is about once a quarter, I think, give an update to the board, and this is the same update, same report we gave to the board earlier this month. We're still working on the format, how to kind of track kind of the key objectives, initiatives that we're undertaking on behalf of the strategic plan they adopted back in October of last year. If you'll recall, there were 5 main objectives: advocacy, information sharing, aging objectives, transportation, and then program excellence, which is basically all the other good stuff we're doing, just keep doing it more and better and so forth. So you've got the full list, but I'll call out a couple of things we're doing just real briefly in the interest of time. Under advocacy, kind of 2 real key things that pop out. One of them you just talked about with our legislative tracking and prioritization. We've done a really good job, I think, collectively, with Jessica taking the lead, with our state lobbyist, Lauren, and with the board and their legislative subcommittee, and really engaging with our state legislators and identifying what's key to the region and trying to get consensus around bills that we want to get behind or oppose or monitor and so forth. So really pretty much stronger advocacy, I think, than we've had in the past. A second item I'll mention under advocacy, we also mentioned that that's related to convening, and this is probably the first group that's going to hear this, but we got word today, I signed it, hopefully it's official now, that we just got our joint land use study grant for implementation, which is a big deal for us. It's $500,000, should be in place for the next 18 months, and that's just a big deal for us convening with the military installations, the broader community, and really identifying what came out of the JLU study and what we can do as far as implementing those measures to keep the military bases happy. So those were a couple of key things in advocacy. A couple of key things I'll mention in information sharing. We held the transportation technology event in February. We've been doing a lot of coordination with our local jurisdictions on information sharing, things like traffic counts and pavement management. Kind of gets into the weeds a little bit, but they love that. The fact that we can maybe coordinate on acquisition of some of these key data sets and help save us all a little bit of money. So a lot of really good work that's happening in the information sharing realm. Aging, a couple of key things going on there. We brought a new program development person on board, Melissa Martz, who's awesome. She's helping us with outreach and raising awareness of our aging programs. We made great progress with the 4-year plan that was recommended through the CAC, developed by the RAC, and the board adopted that earlier this month. So we're making great progress there as well. And finally, in transportation, a couple of things I'll mention there. And this kind of crosses over in some other activities as well, but we're coordinating with Dr. Cog up in the Denver metro area to develop a database that's going to help us track our transportation, our funded transportation projects. We have a TIP database. You approved a TIP amendment earlier this meeting, but we don't have a really good user-friendly database that both the jurisdictions and the public can get access to see what's funded in a mapping kind of format and any other kind of format. So we're partnering with Dr. Cog to basically use their same database and platform to make that happen. So pretty excited about that. A ton of other really good stuff going on, but in the interest of time, I'll leave it at that for now, but happy to answer any questions you might have. Okay.
Thank you thank you for the report.
Sure.
Yes.
Really,
My pleasure. There's a lot of good stuff going on, and I think I mentioned this before. We've brought on board some major rock stars the past 6 months or so, so there's a lot of really good stuff happening. We're losing a major rock star next week, so we're all saddened by that. When Ken leaves us, his last day is next Tuesday, but Yeah, a lot of good stuff going on, a lot of great support from the board. I appreciate everything you guys are doing as well. I mean, just to hear the deliberation about the membership issue and everything else you deal with, I appreciate that. This is a major team effort, so.
You need to come back next month and tell us more about those great things.
Yeah.
I'm happy to, yes.
And thank you so much to Ken, sorry, I'm just jumping in, but thank you, Ken, for
Oh, yes, Ken, thank you for all that you've done.
Thank you. Ken Prather, PVACG Transportation Planner.
Retired?
Not yet, not yet. I'm still here until next Tuesday, but I did want to drop in and take the opportunity to thank you and say goodbye. I have always enjoyed coming before you, well, most of the time. You ask great questions. Your questions are always good, and sometimes they're hard, but I've always learned to appreciate the hard ones. And so you've always helped me, and PPACG as well. So I just wanted to wish you the best and to carry on.
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations. Okay, do we have any more member discussion?
I have an announcement. I put one or two of these. I put one on each table and just so it could be passed aside. This coming Saturday night, there is a nice fundraiser being put on by one of the major, and in fact, it's the largest Sertoma club here in Colorado Springs. It's called Spirits of Spring. I think it's their 14th or 15th annual, so it's a pretty big deal. It's very nice. It's a little pricey, but you get all the food you can eat and all the booze you can drink.
Whoa.
And if you want to buy something at the auctions, you could do so too. But anyway, these are out there. If there is interest, it's spiritsofspring.org, and it's Saturday night from 6 until, well, most people are either asleep or on the way home by 10. So, it's at the Antlers Hotel in their ballroom. And all the money raised goes to the HERES charity and one other. HERES is the charity run by Sertoma that gives the less fortunate people in our El Paso County hearing aids if they need them, for free, basically. We help 70 to 75 people a year get hearing aids, so $250,000 worth of end value.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And that's all funded, partially funded by this, but it's run by Sertoma. So I put that one out. It's a great event. It's a little pricey, but it returns a lot, and it gives to the community. I'd urge you to think about it.
I'd like to make a little report from the mountains, Ann Green Mountain Falls. On March 5th, we were so delighted that the Mayor Levy, who is on the Board of Directors, and Kip Riley, and anyway, all the people and their town manager came to Green Mountain Falls Board of Trustees meeting at 7 o'clock at night to talk to us about their water control problems that they're working on up in Woodland. And they're assuring us, being downstream, we're affected. And I just thought it was wonderful, and it was a demonstration of inter-town, inter-membership cooperation, let's put it that way. And just from my part, since I'll give this to Jessica unless she it was in the Courier, our little local paper. But just as another thing, I would just say, as old as I am, I don't have to work anymore or anything, but I go to the town council meetings and the planning commission meetings in Woodland Park, too. And I'm, like John is on their planning commission, and I find it so helpful and interesting to have the time to do that. And because the mountains are unique, but not all your water, but a lot of it comes down, and the floods do. So I just wanted to mention that, and I wanted to thank also all of you on that committee that worked so hard, because I know that's not easy to do. But I just thought I'd tell you about that. So thank you. Bye.
Okay, thank you, Ann. Any other member?
One quick note.
Sure.
Something that's gone through the Colorado Springs City Council is this ADU, accessory dwelling unit. We used to have those small houses when, there was the problem.
Tiny houses?
Not just tiny houses. These were the
Tuberculosis
places, and those were outlawed basically. And now they're going to come back as a way of affordable housing, if you will, for grandparents and kids and that kind of thing. But there's they're changing that, and they're going through sorting through how far back they have to be. Can they be connected to the utilities in the house? Maximum square footage of about 740 square feet. All that kind of stuff. So just kind of, if you see about that in the paper, you will hear about it soon. It's called ADU ordinance, but that'll be coming up.
Okay, thank you. It's good to know. Any other member announcements? Okay, Courtney, we've already finished with you. So.
But you'll come back.
But you'll come back, thank you. Okay, Mountain Metro Transit, do we have any?
They will either be here next month, or they may ask for another delay, just depending on how things are going with some of their partner in relationships.
Okay, that's great. Okay, do we need to schedule anything else? Yes, Ellen.
Just a quick reminder, we have entered the season of urban-suburban wildland interface concerns for possible future issues, including wildfires.
Yeah.
Just now, it's being predicted to be a very low expectation year, safer than many of the last, but you can never be too vigilant.
No.
This is a great time to remind everyone in our mutual groups and communities to do their best they can. Thank you.
The season never ends.
No, it never does. Okay, if there's nothing else, then we will adjourn. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That's right, it'll help keep the fires out, right?
Fire and floods, that's all you get.
That's all we get.
You can have this. The only change, it's a revision, okay? The only
I'd-
change is they added this item. This is yours to keep. I don't need a